few days ago, this channel published the full story of Google's missing model, Gemini 3.5 Pro, the flagship promised on stage at I.O., then delayed past 3 deadlines. In that video, we reported 2 things the coverage hadn't caught up to yet. 1. That Bloomberg sources said the delay came down to the model's coding falling short of Google's own bar. 2. That Google was, quote, weighing a stopgap release. At the time, both were labeled reported, not confirmed. This morning, Google confirmed both. It shipped not 1, but 3 new Gemini models. And the flagship everyone is actually waiting for? Still not here, no date, months late. So today, exactly what Google released, why it's genuinely clever and genuinely a consolation prize at the same time. The one number in this announcement that quietly validates everything this channel has been saying about AI costs all month, the security model they're keeping on a leash. The 2 words Google slipped into the blog post that reveal what they're really thinking. And the question that actually matters now, if the cheap models keep getting this good, does the missing flagship even matter anymore? As always, what's confirmed, what's reported, cleanly separated. Let's get into it. First, the context, because the timing here is not an accident. This announcement dropped on a Tuesday. Alphabet's earnings call is Wednesday tomorrow. Read that sequence like an executive. When you have a flagship stuck in the workshop, mounting press about delays and Chinese open-weight models taking headlines by the day, you do not walk into an earnings call empty-handed. You ship what you can ship, you frame it as strength, and you change the subject from "where's your flagship" to "look at all this shipping velocity." That is exactly what happened this morning. This is a real product release, and it is also, unmistakably, a narrative management release. Both things are true, hold both. Now the 3 models, and they all live in one tier, which is the whole story. Google's lineup has always had a shape. Flash-Lite at the bottom for cheap, high-volume work, Flash in the middle as the workhorse, and Pro at the top for the hardest reasoning. Everything announced today is in the Flash tier, the middle, and bottom. Nothing touched the top. Google upgraded the engine room and the economy seats, while the first-class cabin stays closed. Keep that picture in your head. It explains everything. Model 1, Gemini 3.6 Flash, the new workhorse and the centerpiece. Model ID Gemini 3.6 Flash. It builds on 3.5 Flash and, per Google, improves coding, computer use, knowledge work, and ML research. But the headline, Google's own headline, isn't capability, it's efficiency. And this is the number I need you to really hear. On the Artificial Analysis Index, Gemini 3.6 Flash uses 17% fewer output tokens than the model it replaces. On one coding benchmark, Data Curves Deeps WE, Google reports up to a 65% reduction. It takes fewer reasoning steps and fewer tool calls to finish a multi-step job. And the price dropped in lockstep. Output tokens fall from $9 per million on the old Flash to $7.50 on the new one. Input sits at $1.50 per million. Stop and appreciate what that is. The flagship of this release, the thing Google is proudest of, is a model that costs less and talks less. Not a model that's dramatically smarter. A model that does the same job while burning fewer tokens. Google's own co-founder level engineers are on social media this morning showing side-by-side demos not of intelligence, but of brevity. The proudest number in a Google AI launch in the summer of 2026 is a smaller bill. And to be fair to the model, the coding gains are real and specific, not just spin. Google reports that on that Deeps WE benchmark, 3.6 Flash produces higher quality, more production-ready code. They cite a jump to 49% where the old Flash sat lower, with, in their words, higher precision, fewer unwanted code edits, and reduced execution loops. Translate that from launch speak, it makes fewer pointless changes to your files and gets stuck in fewer retry spirals. Anyone who has watched a coding agent thrash, editing the same file 6 times, rerunning the same failing command, knows that fewer execution loops is not a vanity metric. It's the difference between an agent that finishes and one that burns your tokens going in circles. So the token savings come from 2 places at once. The model is less chatty and it's less wrong. And being less wrong is its own form of efficiency. Credit where due, that's a genuinely useful workhorse upgrade. It's just not a flagship. One more concrete detail worth knowing. The knowledge cutoff on both new models is March 2026, held constant across every context length, and 3.6 Flash slots into the exact position Google's internal anti-gravity system had already reserved for it, above Flash-Lite, below the still absent Pro. The furniture for the flagship is arranged, the chair is just empty. Now, why does that matter so much to this channel specifically? Because it is a confession. For a year, the entire industry sold you on scale. Bigger models, more parameters, higher benchmarks, and a bill that climbs with all of it. This channel has spent this month documenting the counter movement. Free tiers, open weights, SSD streaming, compression gateways, every one of them an attack on cost. And here's Google, the largest AI company on Earth, standing up and making cost the headline feature. When the giant starts bragging about the number getting smaller, the argument is over. Efficiency isn't the scrappy underdog's angle anymore. It's the main stage. Model 2, Gemini 3.5 Flash-Lite. And a few analysts think this is quietly the more important release. It runs at 350 output tokens per second, very fast, and costs 30 cents per million input, $2.50 per million output. That is cheap enough to change what's economically possible. If you're processing millions of routine items, classifying, translating, extracting, tagging, or running a fleet of small narrow agents that each do one dumb thing reliably, Flash-Lite is the model where the math suddenly works. It's not exciting, it's infrastructure. And infrastructure is where the real money quietly moves. Model 3 is the strange and interesting one, Gemini 3.5 Flash Cyber, a version of Flash fine-tuned specifically to find and fix software security vulnerabilities. Inside Google's CodeMender system, multiple Flash cyber agents work together to produce a single combined vulnerability report. And Google says it reaches competitive frontier performance on a cyber benchmark called CyberGym. But here's the part worth your attention. You can't have it. Google is releasing it, quote, exclusively to governments and trusted partners as a limited access pilot. And they say plainly why: the dual-use nature of the technology. A tool that's expert at finding security holes is by definition also a tool that could be misused to find them for the wrong reasons. So Google built it, demonstrated it, and then deliberately kept it on a leash. I want to be fair and clear here, because this is a responsible move worth crediting. Releasing a powerful capability cautiously to defenders first is exactly the kind of restraint you want to see with security tooling. We're not going to walk through how such a system works beyond what Google published. The point that matters for this video is the strategy. Google is signaling we can do frontier things. We're choosing where and how carefully, which, when your flagship is late, is a useful thing to be seen doing. So let's zoom out and be honest about what this release is. The balanced view, both sides. The genuine good. This is real value for developers today. Cheaper, less verbose, more efficient models that plug into existing workflows immediately, available right now in the Gemini API, AI Studio, Android Studio, the Gemini app, and Flash-Lite, even coming to search. For anyone running agents at volume, a 17% token cut is not a rounding error. It's a line item that compounds across every task, every day. Google shipped something useful, full stop. The honest catch: none of this is the thing that was promised. Nobody at I/O groaned with anticipation over a mid-tier efficiency update. The 2 million token context window, the deep think reasoning mode, the flagship meant to answer Fable 5 and GPT 5.6, and now Kimi K3, still missing, still no date, still per today's reporting, falling short of Google's internal coding goals after missing that original May target. Shipping 3 Flash models while the Pro stays dark is like a restaurant that promised a new signature entree finally opening the doors to announce the side dishes got cheaper. Welcome, genuinely. But it's not what you came for. And now the detail I promised, the 2 words Google slipped into today's announcement that tell you what they're really thinking. In the same breath as launching these Flash models, Google teased Gemini 4, the next generation, not 3.5 Pro, the thing that's actually overdue, but the generation after it. Sit with that. When a company is very late on version X, and instead of giving you a date for X, they start waving at version X plus 1. That is a specific and readable signal. It's the move you make when you'd rather redirect attention forward than answer the question about the thing behind schedule. Combine it with the analyst speculation we covered last time, that Google might skip 3.5 Pro entirely and fold its resources into the next line. And today's Gemini 4 tease stops looking like a throwaway and starts looking like a tell. To be clear and fair, Google has not said it's skipping 3.5 Pro, but they had every opportunity this morning to give it a date, and instead they pointed at the horizon. In launch watching, what a company chooses not to say is often the loudest part. There's one more piece of strategic context that makes today make sense, and it's the one nobody at Google will say out loud. The pressure is coming from a direction they can't control. In just the last week, while Gemini's flagship sat in testing, Moonshot's Kimi K3 topped a major coding leaderboard and got so popular the company had to pause new signups because it ran out of GPUs. Alibaba previewed a 2.4 trillion parameter QN. DeepSeek's next version ships in days. Open waits at the frontier on a relentless cadence. Google isn't just racing OpenAI and Anthropic anymore. It's racing a swarm of free, downloadable models that get better every week and don't miss deadlines because they don't announce them on a stage first. Shipping cheaper Flash models is in part Google doing the one thing it can do quickly to stay in the conversation while the big gun stays jammed. And the calendar makes the timing almost poetic. This release lands the day before Alphabet's earnings, but it also lands into one of the busiest weeks the AI industry has ever had. DeepSeek V4 goes stable in 3 days. Kimi K3's open weights drop free to the world in 6. There are reports of a White House framework on frontier AI expected within the week. Google had a narrow window to put points on the board before that wall of news arrived and buried anything less than a flagship, and they used it. Whether that reads to you as savvy or as desperate probably depends on how much benefit of the doubt you extend to a company that's now missed 3 self-imposed deadlines. But strategically, shipping today rather than next week was correct. In a news cycle, this loud silence is the only thing worse than a stopgap. So what does this actually mean for you practically today? 3 things. But before the practical part, one strategic point that's easy to miss in all the Google is losing noise, because the honest picture has 2 sides. Yes, Google's flagship is late, but look at where these Flash models are landing today. The Gemini API AI Studio Android Studio. The Gemini consumer app and Flash-Lite is going into search itself. That is a distribution surface no open-weight lab on Earth can match. Kimi K3 can top a leaderboard, but it can't put itself in front of billions of people inside the world's default search engine tomorrow morning. Google's real weapon was never being first to the smartest model. It's that a good enough, cheap, fast model, multiplied by that distribution, reaches more human beings than a frontier model behind an API ever will. So while everyone dunks on the missing Pro, Google just quietly made the model that runs inside. Search cheaper and more efficient. That is not the move of a company that's panicking. It's the move of a company playing a different game. One where the flagship is a prestige project and the Flash tier is the actual business. Both readings are true at once. Late on prestige, ruthless on distribution. Hold both. Okay, now the 3 practical things. 1, if you use Gemini already, the upgrade is free money. Point your agents and pipelines at 3.6 Flash, measure your token count on a few representative tasks, real tasks, with retries and human corrections counted. And if the numbers hold, you just cut your bill without cutting capability. That's the rare update where the correct action is, yes, migrate, provided you measure rather than assume. Google's own guidance says as much. Don't swap every endpoint blindly. Test on representative work, then move. 2, notice which tier is competing for your money. The action in AI right now is not at the untouchable top. It's in the cheap, fast, efficient middle, exactly where open-weight models, free gateways, and now Google's own Flash line are all converging. If you're choosing a model to build on this week, the honest field isn't which flagship, it's Gemini 3.6 Flash versus GLM versus Kimi's coding model versus a local model on your own hardware. And increasingly, they're close enough that price, speed, and where your data goes decide it. That's a fantastic position to be a developer in. 3, for the flagship. Keep waiting with alternatives running, not with a blocked roadmap. The only launch signal that counts is Gemini 3.5 Pro appearing as a generally available model with a card and a price. Not a Flash release, not a Gemini 4 tease. Until then, the production frontier is on the shelf today. Fable 5 and GPT 5.6 at the premium end. This new Flash line and the open-weight models for everything else. Let's do the ledger the way this channel always does. Confirmed versus reported, 30 seconds. Confirmed as of today, Google shipped 3 Flash tier models, 3.6 Flash, 3.5 Flash-Lite, and 3.5 Flash Cyber. 3.6 Flash is cheaper and about 17% more token efficient than 3.5 Flash. Output down from 9 to 750 per million. Flash-Lite runs at 350 tokens a second for 30 cents in, 250 out. Flash Cyber is restricted to governments and trusted partners. Gemini 3.5 Pro remains unreleased with no date. And Google publicly teased Gemini 4. Reported but not confirmed that the Pro delay is specifically about coding falling short of internal goals. That's sourced reporting, not a Google statement. That Google might skip 3.5 Pro for the next generation. That's analyst speculation the Gemini 4 tease happens to feed. Treat both as weather, not fact until a model card exists. Step back, and here's the real takeaway. Bigger than one company's release schedule. 6 months ago, an AI launch meant one thing: a bigger, smarter flagship and a headline about a benchmark record. Today, the largest AI company in the world held a launch where the star of the show was a model that costs less and says less. And the flagship, the smart one, the record setter, didn't show up at all. That inversion is the story of AI in 20 in a single morning. The frontier of intelligence is getting harder and slower and later to reach for everyone, even Google. But the frontier of usable, affordable, good enough AI is advancing so fast that the giant now leads its own launch with the price going down. The moat was the model, then it was the price, and the price war just went fully mainstream, led from the top. So maybe the question isn't where is Gemini 3.5 Pro? Maybe the more honest question, the one I'll pin below, is this: for the work you actually do, does the missing flagship even matter anymore? Or has good, fast, and cheap quietly become enough, and the race for the absolute smartest model become a spectator sport that no longer touches your daily workflow? Tell me where you land, because the answer across everyone watching decides whether the flagship era is peaking or just pausing. Every source, Google's official announcement, the pricing pages, and the reporting I cited is linked in the description, so you can verify every number and check on any given day whether the missing flagship has finally appeared. If you want the story behind the headlines, sourced and in plain English every single day, and the moment Gemini 3.5 Pro actually ships, the follow-up is already planned. Subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.